The following is an interview with Hand of the Cause Mr. Khadem by David Ogren of the Bahai Periodicals Office. The interview was conducted Saturday evening, September 19, 1981, at the Green Lake Bahai Conference.
One of the many things that I'd like to ask you is about your family. I don't even know if your parents were Baha'is. Do you come from a Baha'i family, Baha'i background?
Yes. I'm the fifth generation Baha'i from the Baha'i family. My grandfather and grandmother on the part of my father, they immigrated. They left Qamsar, which is one of the villages of Kashan, because of the persecution, came to Tehran and lived there. And then my father lived in Tehran.
Were you their only child?
No. I have a sister who is living, and a brother, and two other brothers who are now in the Abha Kingdom.
What memories come to mind about your early years? I imagine you were in Baha'i children's classes.
That's right.
Were they a lot different than children's classes that we try to have, for example, in the United States? What sticks out in your mind?
Well, I would like to say that the children's classes started in Persia, and that wonderful, prominent Baha'i teacher who is now in the Abha Kingdom, Janab Hashemizadeh, Mutawajjeh, is well known. He started with some of the friends. And I remember I was taken from the roof of our home, which was next to theirs, for the first session of the children's classes. And because it was difficult to go around, and then when we went there, all the children were invited to come of that vicinity. And the first thing they taught us, what is a Baha'i, which is the first lesson of the Baha'i of the course with the Persian children classes all over Persia. And he as well as others, they told us how to sit and how to behave.
About how old were you and the other children then?
Well, I believe I was only 5 or 6 years of age.
What about, I assume you attended the public school?
Well, first we had a Baha'i school, a public Baha'i school.
Oh.
Then, which was a branch of Tarbiyat school, and later all these schools were closed by the order of the former Shah, the father of this Shah who was thrown.
So then you started attending the regular state-sponsored school?
No, not the state. The Baha'is administered the school.
I mean, after the Baha'i school was closed.
After the Baha'i schools, yes, I was in a college, which was government college, Darul Funun.
How was it at that time as far as being a Baha'i? Were you subjected to forms of persecution?
All kinds.
Is that right?
Yes, to the point that the professor we had for Arabic and religious lessons, he knew me, and he rejected me. He refused me to pass the exam at the end of the year. And there's a long story about him that he regretted later, years after, when he came to me for help, some kind of help. And he regretted, he cried for what he did.
In other words, he did not allow you to be graduated?
That's right. But I joined again. Years later, I became graduated. But at that year, he didn't do it. He didn't let me do. He said, you do not deserve. The Minister of Education was sitting there, and others. He just openly said, you do not deserve because you are a Baha'i.
In spite of that, you went on to do a number of different kinds of work, didn't you?
Such as what?
Vocations.
What?
You were in real estate, I believe. Is that right?
Well, then after that, when I left the school, and I taught in the same school, Tarbiyat school, in the what we call secondary school. What do you call it here? High school. Yes, I taught in high school, and then I joined the service of the Ministry of Finance. Then I joined the oil company as Persian chief tutor.
This was in Tehran?
No, in the south of Persia. And I was in charge of educational department of that company that subsidized the expenses of all government schools in that province. And after that, I came to Tehran, and then in Tehran I joined one of the embassies as secretary for translation and correspondence. While I was there, I had my own business too. They knew it, so that I became prosperous in that business.
And was that real estate?
Well, yes, that's right. It was building houses and development. Different way.
Was it
in Persia.
sometime when you were beginning your multiple careers that you had your first contact with Shoghi Effendi? Was it in that period?
Mm-hmm. No, it was during the time that I was teaching in the school. I was teaching in, what did you say?
High school.
High school, excuse me. You see how soon I forget? Yes, while I was there teaching in the high school.
Can you tell us a little bit about that, the first contact that you had with the beloved guardian? What were the circumstances?
Well, it's a long story. It's a long story. You know, everybody had such a love for the beloved Shoghi Effendi after the passing of Abdul Baha. And I'd like to tell you that following the example of Abdul Baha, Baha'u'llah, Abdul Baha, the beloved guardian went on seclusion. You know, in the beginning of the ministry of every one of these divine souls, there were so many problems, so many difficulties, disunity, created from the people within and without of the faith. The enemies of the faith and those who are not sincere, so that, as we know and we read in the book of Iran, Baha'u'llah decided to go on seclusion. He withdrew for two years. And he tells us that was the greatest agony to his heart. And then Abdul Baha followed the same example. So that Abdul Baha also went to seclusion, first to Tiberia and to the cave of Elisha in the Holy Land and Tiberias. This was usual also with the prophets of God. So after the passing of Abdul Baha, the covenant breakers and those who were not sincere, they created so many problems, and the beloved Shoghi Effendi was faced with all these things. He followed that example and went to seclusion. And then the greatest holy leaf administered the affairs of the faith. We know it it's in the history of the faith. After the beloved Shoghi Effendi promised to come back when he felt that there was unity, absolute unity amongst the Bahai communities, he fulfilled his promise and he came back. The Central Assembly, because at that time there was a National Assembly, the Central National Assembly of Iran, they advised the Baha'is to write to the Guardian and show their devotion.
This is while he was in Switzerland?
No, when he came back. and just show their obedience, their loyalty, their devotion to the beloved Shawqi Effendi in order to cheer up his heart, which they did. And I wrote a letter to the beloved Shawqi Effendi as well. And when I received the answer, it meant so much to me, so that I was so touched by that tablet from the Guardian that I have written this in Persian, the details of everything, so that I couldn't come from that place where I took this tablet of the beloved Shawqi Effendi. There was a Bahai who accompanied me, and he took care of me. He took me to my mother and said that he was very careful to be with me. Had he not been with me, I might have had accident, because I was so overwhelmed with that tablet from the beloved Shawqi Effendi. So from that time on, the firelight, the ignition of the love of the Guardian and in my heart was ablaze. I wished to go and visit him. So it happened. I was praying day and night and cried for that great purpose. Until there was a wonderful Bahai, you all heard about him, by name Haji Amin, who was the trustee of Hukuk, a wonderful, wonderful man. The beloved Shawqi Effendi praised him so much. He said, the beloved of the hearts of the Baha'is, as so many titles about him, Haji Amin. I came out from our home when I saw that this old man was walking in a big street which is called Amiriye, under the shade of the trees, shadows of the trees, with his cane. I reached him, and he was so kind to everybody. He asked me, and he could read from my face. He said, what's wrong with you? And I told him, weeping and crying, that I had no other wish but to go to the Holy Land and visit the beloved Shawqi Effendi and be in his presence. He took my hand and led me to one of the houses which belonged to a Bahai close by and said, let's go there and speak. So we went there and sat. The owner of the house joined us with another Bahai teacher, a well-known man. And when I said that, these friends asked Haji Amin, they told him, since he had permission from Abdul Baha to give permission to anyone who wanted to go to the Holy Land, they asked him, please give permission to me to go. And he said this was in the time of Abdul Baha. Now everything changed. He can't give me permission. Then they said, all right, write to the beloved Guardian a letter and beseech him. He said, all right. And he started to write a letter. I have a copy of it. With such devotion to the dust of the feet of the servants of the beloved Shawqi Effendi, he expressed himself and gave it to me. Of course, it was a very good petition, but it didn't satisfy me. I wished he wrote it emphatically and beseeching the Guardian to give me permission, and said I couldn't stay in Tehran. I couldn't. So I prepared my way to Baghdad, and I said I'll go there and see what is the plan of God in Baghdad. He said, all right, take this letter to Baghdad, and there mail it from there, because it reached much earlier. So I took that, but I was not pleased with it. I was not right. Then the friends heard about this, and many of them went to Haji Amin and asked him to write and beseech the Guardian strongly. He said no. Finally, two Bahai teachers who were very close to us, well known, they went and they tried in vain. Well, I decided to go with that letter from Haji Amin. But you know, Baha'u'llah quotes that I know God because He changes our plans. A messenger came from Haji Amin and said that Haji Amin wanted to see me. I went there and he said, he was crying, said, this wonderful man. And he said, now I am inspired that you be going. And that's why I sent after you. Now I have my secretary, Haji Ghulam Nizar, who was assistant to him. He's sitting, he's here with pen and paper. You dictate to him anything you want me to write, and I'll sign it. I was very happy about that. And then I said, all right. I said, please, to be polite, you dictate yourself. And he started to dictate. He wrote a petition to the Guardian, 2 pages, and beseeching him that please give him permission to come. But in the meantime, he said to come and make pilgrimage and come back soon. Which later the beloved Chawi Effendi said, Haji Amin has written that you go back soon. Well, when I was happy to have that letter from Haji Amin. I turned the first one back to him. He said, no, you must take both with you. And I said, Haji, well, the second one is enough. He said, no, take both and send it from Baghdad and wait for your permission. If the beloved Chawi Effendi permits you to come, to go. If not, he said verbally, he said, if not, so much the better. And I said, Haji, what do you mean by so much the better? He said, anything that the Guardian wishes. That's right. And he was right. It happened that my father also wrote me a letter to the same point. And I received it in Beirut. He said, my son, be happy and pleased with whatever the Guardian, the beloved Chawi Effendi wishes. If permission is not given to you, be happy and come back. So this was the case, and I took that and I went to Baghdad in a hurry. I didn't stop on the way in different towns and places, and the transportation was very difficult at that time. It was 1925. Then I passed through all these places until I reached Baghdad and mailed it. And I said to the beloved Chawi Effendi, I said, I'd like to change the subject. I said, my beloved, unless the beloved would not attract as a magnet the loved one, he wouldn't dare to move from his place. And this is my case. And when I sent that, the friends in Baghdad were so kind to me, very kind. I stayed, I don't know how many days, 1 or 2 days, waiting for the answer. Naturally, it would take maybe a week or so or more. A messenger came from the Central National Assembly of Baghdad to me and said, the National Assembly, it was Central Assembly, not National. They said the Central Assembly had their own session and they consulted about you. And now they decided that you go without permission. They take all responsibility on their shoulders. If the Guardian blames, say this was our fault. Because we consulted that if you don't go, if you wait, you may die. You may not. You may take this wish with you to the next world. So you go. And I left Baghdad. And on the way, I was in a great hurry.
Again?
Yes, true. And then until we reached, we were close to Beirut. In the restaurant, I didn't let the passengers to have their meals. I said, let's go as quickly as possible. And in the car, I was sitting on the right side, on the back seat, with a Frenchman. And I kept asking him, where is the shrine of Baha'u'llah, where are the holy places? And he was tired. He said to the driver that I don't let him be quiet and alone. So I prayed to myself. I said, oh, Baha'u'llah, help me. Until finally he gave me a knock. The car was passing, he said, Selo tombo de Baha'u'llah. We were passing by the shrine of Baha'u'llah. He said, this is the shrine of Baha'u'llah. I prayed hard, and when we reached there, at the house of the master, at the door, with the plaque of Abdul Baha, with the flowers over it, I was so excited, and I didn't have permission. So the driver, he was patient, but he didn't know what to do. So he took my valise and put it on the ground and said, now see your own way. I was alone. I was left alone. That I saw that a Dutchman, a Bahai, a new Bahai, who was there in the pilgrim house, Western pilgrim house, opposite the house of the master. They were watching. They could see that a young man has arrived. And they had pity for me. He came and embraced me and said, Allahu Akbar. The father of the beloved guardian was on the top of the stairs, and he greeted me and said, your permission was obtained. And it was to be mailed today. I was very I was sent to the pilgrim house. On the way that goes to the shrine of the Bab and Abdul Baha, I passed by and prayed in these two shrines. And when I was there at the pilgrim house, I was told to have a little rest, because that was a Sunday, and the beloved Shoghi Effendi usually came this Sunday to the pilgrim house. They said the pilgrims would not expect to go to be called by the guardian, because the guardian comes in the afternoon. The moment I put my valise on the floor, the beloved Shoghi Effendi had already sent a messenger to call me. So I hastened to him. And I went to the house of the beloved, of the master. Praying and crying, I don't know. And the guardian, the messenger went there that I was there. The beloved Shoghi Effendi said, all right, let him be there, downstairs. There was a reception room. The mailman of the guardian worked there, and the friends enjoyed very much in that room. Well, apparently the beloved Shoghi Effendi wanted me to calm down, to my excitement. He said, let him be there. And then the messenger came and said, now he has called you. I went up, and I thought the guardian was in the room, but he wasn't. And when I went to the reception room of Abdul Baha with all those things, and the story of Abdul Baha receiving thousands of pilgrims in that room, and now the guardian is receiving, I couldn't consent to sit in that room. So I walked and started to pray. And after a little time that I was calmed down, the door opened, and the beloved Shoghi Effendi entered the room. Any time I remember that story, I have no choice but to repeat and a part of the will and testament of Abdul Baha about the guardian. Perhaps I have it here, if I have. Anytime I reach to this, I said salutation and praise, blessing and glory rest upon that primal branch of the divine and sacred law tree, grown out, blessed, tender, verdant, and flourishing from the twin holy trees, the most wondrous, unique, and peerless pearl that doth gleam from out the twin surging seas. Well is it with him that seeketh the shelter of his shade, that shadoweth all mankind. Well, I'll let you read it. I can't. Just you. Here. What did I say?
These are your comments?
Yes.
Even now, with the easing of my heart, I can hear the melody of the voice of the beloved Shoghi Effendi saying, but I can't say it.
Khosh Ahmadid. Khosh Ahmadid.
Welcome, welcome. The privilege of touching the hem of the chosen branch of Baha'u'llah was mine. Was it appropriate to leave it? No. No one but him was aware of my rapture. I was totally unconscious of myself. How much less to understand the wisdom of what poured from my lips. Kisses were proffered to the hands of the guardian. In lieu of the guardian saying, it is not permitted, a voice came from the bottom of my heart, by God, it is impossible. The beloved guardian, whose blessings and bounties are countless and overwhelming, gave his hand to this humble servant, who proffered kisses on behalf of himself and the beloved friends. Is this for a book? This should be for a book. The beloved Shoghi Effendi, with the dignity of Solomon, who was kind to an ant, was now asking how I was. All words from his blessed lips eliminated sorrows and gave me new life. I found myself before a beloved one who knew my past, my present, and my future, and who with a Christ-like breath gave me new life. This was a great, great honor. His glance was so impressive that it penetrated to the very depth of my heart. His dignity would make emperors bow down. Even though a youth, great agony and distress could be seen on his face, and the trace of patience and forbearance for difficulties and sufferings could be seen on his brow. The blessings of the guardian, like torrents, overwhelmed me. He asked about the devoted Baha'is of Persia, and also of those whom I had met in Iraq, Damascus, and Beirut. He showered his bounties upon all. Gracious God, it is possible in this world that any kind of father can be 1/10 of 1/10 so kind as the guardian. Is it possible in this world? Is it possible that any kind father can be 1/10 of 1/10 so kind as the guardian? This servant, although burdened with sin and abasement, had been permitted to the court of his beloved. With humbleness I said, my beloved, the yearning of attaining to thy holy presence has taken the rein of patience from my hands. Therefore, uncontrollably I hastened to thy abode. The beloved guardian, with his great compassion, assured me that it was destined for me to come on pilgrimage. Permission was granted you, this is in quotes, permission was granted you, and it was to have been sent today by Abi, my father, but you came to us first. Do you have any plans to translate the tablets that the guardian wrote to you in response to your letter into English? I'd love to read that.
No.
You say you...
well, he was so kind to write it. I didn't deserve. But he hinted for my future in that tablet. Without seeing me, in that first tablet, he told me about my future. Well, as I said here, for him there was no present, past, and future. Everything was known to him. I was in the presence of the sign of God, the guardian of the cause of Baha'u'llah, who through the channel of Baha'u'llah knows everything. And I feel his closeness all the time. I tell you, if God forbid, if it happens one moment that I feel he's separated from us in spirit, that would be the end of my life.
A question comes to mind about the guardian. You may not know the answer, but do you happen to have any idea as to why the beloved guardian, during his lifetime, did not come to the... Well, he was in Europe, but he didn't come to the United States.
Mm-hmm.
Did he ever give you any indication as to why, or did he have a desire to do that, but did not...
To this part?
Yes, to this part of the world?
Well, I don't know. I can't answer that. But in spirit, he was always with us. We received, the friends received his correspondence, his tablets, his instructions. In fact, everything we have in administration is from the guardian. All these victories and triumphs of the cause are the choice fruit of his labors. And the friends could feel this all over. They felt the spirit of the guardian. Abdul Baha, in fact, when the guardian was a young boy, he predicted, he said to that American Bahai that he says, this infant, according to Isaiah, is born. And he said, you'll see him with the greatest power of God, the greatest knowledge. And Abdul Baha says, his face will illumine the whole world, so that we can see through his directives, pioneering and opening all these places in all parts of the world. We can see the labors, the fruit of his labors, so that he's...
Do you have 5 children?
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes.
I've met only one of them.
Yes.
So I don't know much about your children.
Mm-hmm.
What things come to mind about the time when they were little, when they were growing up?
The time they were little?
When they were younger, when they were in their formative years, I understand that they're all well-educated in diverse professions, medicine, etc., and you were their Baba. What things stand out in your mind as far as the important things that you felt you tried to impart to them? And I ask that by way of advice to people like myself, to fathers now, to Baha'i fathers. What advice might you have in the area of fathering, which is a new word?
Well, to tell you the truth, I didn't do anything.
You did nothing?
God had been so generous. The beloved Zikrullah Khadem was so generous. And Baha'u'llah, Abdul Baha, if we do not fail to train them, to send them to the Baha'i schools, to tell them about the faith, to ignite the fire of love of Baha'u'llah in their hearts, just ignite the fire of Baha'u'llah in the hearts of men and leave them. That takes care of everything. That takes care of everything. If they have that love, they do anything. They go on pioneering, they disperse, they spend for the faith, they give their lives, even they go to the field of martyrdom.
Would you say that one of the most, or maybe you might even feel that the most important thing in giving them the love of Baha'u'llah is the idea that little ones, they look at the adults, they look at their parents, and if you have it, they will see it and sense that?
Sure.
So just by being an example?
Yes. And the guardian was, he advised that the Baha'i children and youth should have good education, so that it happened to some of the Baha'is, he gave advice to go right away on pioneering, and to some others he said, have high education, so that we should do anything in our power to use our education or to for the service of the cause.
How did you answer that question to your own children? I'm imagining that there must have been some time when they were asking you as to, shall I go become a pioneer, or shall I stay in school or enter school? What was your advice?
Well, as I told you, it depends. I just mentioned that in the presence of the beloved Shoghi Effendi, my son, one of my sons, was there, and another son of another Bahai, who is wonderful, and now is serving the cause. And when my son asked the guardian to leave his education and go on pioneering, the beloved Shoghi Effendi said, no, you go for your high education and then. But to the other one, he said, yes.
Go now.
Go now. So that we don't know. I can't say. It depends. We must pray about it and see what Baha'u'llah inspires us in our hearts. Each one according the way that Baha'u'llah wishes. But the main thing is to do anything for Baha'u'llah. The purpose of education going on point, just all to be used for the service of the cause.
There's no easy answer then
for
a father or a mother.
No.
In 1959, was it, when it was decided that, and you were a hand of the cause, it was decided that you would come to the Western Hemisphere, I believe, and that you would, live in the United States. How was that decided? What happened to reach that conclusion? And if you didn't have too much to say about it, how did you feel about it?
Well, that was 1952 when I was named by the beloved guardian as the hand of the cause. But the story goes back to the 1938 or 1939, I'm not sure, that in the Pilgrim House we enjoyed the time, and I tell you, I had a little nap in the morning to be ready to go in the afternoon to the presence of the guardian, and we had such a happy time. And there was a Bahai there who is now in the Abha kingdom. He lived over 100 years, and his name was Hussein Ruhi, that the beloved Shoghi Effendi bade me to go with him to Egypt to meet the friends there, which I did. And just in order to busy ourselves, we started to work to study a geographical globe that the children they study in the school. It was there in the Pilgrim House, and I like that. Anytime I go to the Holy Land, I go just to that globe and remember. It refreshes the memory of that day. And we started. My finger first went to Iceland, and then coming down to Europe, and we studied the distances between these countries, and then I moved my finger to come to the United States, and finishing the United States, going down to Mexico and Central America, all these places, until I reached to Guatemala. And when my finger reached to Guatemala, I didn't know how to pronounce it. So Hussein Ruhi, my friend, he helped me. And both of us thought a bit, and he said, this is Guatemala. We didn't know the purpose, the reason why we did that. But that was in preparation for the beloved Shoghi Effendi coming in the afternoon. The beloved Shoghi Effendi came in the afternoon, and he greeted us. Smile, his face was so shining. That was one of the happiest days of his life. The first thing he said,
I can guess.
The first thing he said, thanks to Baha'u'llah that his message has reached to every part in the world. In Iceland, that my finger was there in Iceland. He said, and now Dr. Esselman's book, Baha'u'llah and the New Era, has been translated into Icelandic language. They have sent 2 copies to me, to the Guardian. It's on the way. When it reaches here, I'll give you one to take back to Persia. And then he paused. He said, if this That was 1939, during the war. The Guardian said, if the German submarines let the boat reach safely. Later on, one of the Baha'is of Persia said, who was in insurance, he said, why didn't you tell us before? That he could use it. Then the Guardian spoke about Europe, speaking about Europe and these the 10 gold countries and all these countries, and then came to speak about the United States. And he praised the Baha'is of the United States of America so much. And he told us that Abdul Baha, how highly he spoke about the American Baha'is, and said that in the sight of God, America is the country of wisdom. And you have it, you have the translation in the Advent of Divine Justice. کشور امریک در نزد حق میدان کشف اسرار است و it's a wonderful tablet. The Guardian said it from memory. And then talking about America, he said he came to Mexico, so spoke about Mexico, and then spoke about Central America, and until he came to say, and he said, he turned to us, he said, also Guatemala. The moment the Guardian said also Guatemala, Hussein Ruhi threw himself on the knees of the Guardian and cried. Then the Guardian turned to me and he said, in future, you will be visiting all these places. He said, I'll send you to the West. Well, he didn't send me, just he planned for me. He said, I'll send you to the West to see the miracles, the mysteries and lights of the cause that Abdul Baha spoke. And then the beloved Choghi Effendi, after he left us and he went to the house of the Master, that was the time for my wife to go to his presence. The ladies would go later. The beloved Choghi Effendi repeated the same thing to her and said, in future, in the accompanying Khadem, you'll be visiting all parts of the world. Any time that she felt that she was not feeling well and complained, I said, no, you'll be visiting all these people, all these places. So that's what has happened. And he planned for me to come to the United States. And then in 1952, that was my last pilgrimage, the beloved Choghi Effendi came and sat, after he walked with us, he sat on the corner of one of the gardens in the shrine of the Bab. And when he sat there, he asked me, he said whether I know from memory parts of the commentary of the Surah of Joseph from the Bab. And I bowed, I said, yes, I know some, but not in order. And I thought that the beloved Choghi Effendi wanted me to chant it from memory. But he took from his pocket an envelope which contained many pages. I think it was 16, 17 pages, with pencil marked on the top. Some of the pages, full page, the verses of the Bab in the commentary of the Surah of Joseph, in some pages just one, and bade me to chant. I took that and started to chant in his presence. And you know, my chanting in the presence of the Guardian, the sign of God on earth, I cried and I coughed. I don't know how I did it. And then the Guardian paused and he stopped me and explained, interpreted parts of it, which were very meaningful, very significant. But in my heart I said, well, we shall have this, and at night we shall remember, we shall study and remember everything the Guardian said. And that was my heart desire, to have those with me. And because on the margin of one, that was the handwriting of the Guardian too. And when I finished every page and put beneath another, it came to the last page. The last page is the Bab addressing the exalted Bab, Baha'u'llah, or remnant of God, which everybody knows from memory. And that refers to his martyrdom. He predicts his martyrdom and his wish to give his life for Baha'u'llah. Without me saying that, the Guardian said that was enough. So I didn't say that. I didn't chant that. It seems that the Guardian was so moved. He didn't want to, because that had reference to the martyrdom of the Bab. And when I finished with all these, I put back in the envelope. And the moment I tried to put it in my pocket, the beloved Chogi Effendi stretched his hand to take it back. And I had no choice. I had to obey. So I rose on my knees and took it to him. And in my heart, I simply said to myself, I said, my beloved, that was not fair. What happened? It remained with the Guardian until a few months later. It was 1952, just before the Nowruz, a few days before the Nowruz, until later I came, there was, these intercontinental conferences, the 5, one of them was here in United States with the dedication of the House of Worship. And I forgot to tell you, the day that the Guardian said in 1939 that you will be visiting all these countries, then he said, and at the dedication of the House of Worship in Wilmette, you will be chanting and participating in the dedication. What can you say about that? There was no present, future, past. He could see. Everything in his presence was so obvious, so clear. So he said, you will be chanting at the dedication of the House of Worship. But he didn't say what time it would come. So when in 1952, after I was here in Hilton Hotel in Chicago, there was in Medina Temple, there was Intercontinental Conference for America, and with the dedication of the House of Worship. The night I entered my room that the National Spiritual Assembly had reserved, and each one of us had his mail in the room on the desk. I collected my mail. The first letter I opened was from the National Spiritual Assembly of the United States, greeting me, welcoming me to the United States. But they said they have a very good news for me. The National Assembly had prepared the agenda of the dedication of the House of Worship. And they had presented to the beloved Chogi Effendi for his approval. He wrote back to them that they should include in that agenda that I chant at the dedication of the House of Worship in Wilmette. And he sent me those passages that I wish to have, that he took it back from me. He sent it to me. Here we are. And added with his own handwriting that verse which I had not chanted. The rest of it is not in his own handwriting. But this one, he was so generous, so kind, he wrote it and sent it to me. That makes the most precious treasure that I have. I made a photocopy and I carry with me. So that I participated and chanted those verses that the Guardian gave it to me to read.
would you share with us a little bit, and I know it's a very long story and our time is short, a little bit about what happened at the World Center between 1957, after the passing of the beloved guardian, and the election of the Universal House of Justice?
Well, you see, I think Baha'u'llah held the hands, and we could feel it. We could feel it. In fact, the beloved Shoghi Effendi, in one of his messages, you know, we had the 10-year crusade, and he revealed a tablet at the end of the first year of the 10-year crusade. In that tablet, he encourages everybody to go and open these places in most beautiful way. And he says when a place is open, isolated to the faith, it's a dot in the book of God. When it becomes a group, it makes a letter, but it doesn't mean anything, but it's potentially very important. And when it makes the local assembly is a word, but still it's not enough. And when the National Assembly is elected, it makes a verse. And the whole verses makes the Universal House of Justice. But in that one, he speaks about this, that as a result of the response of the Baha'is to start by dot and letter and word and all these things, he said that by the end, during the remaining 9 years, it be crowned with the formation of Universal House of Justice. He predicted that the Universal House of Justice be formed at the end of the 10-year crusade, so that the hands of the institution of the hands of the cause of God, they had that assignment. As you know, he called them chief stewards to take care of the world order of Baha'u'llah, which was there in the form of embryo. The beloved Shoghi Effendi, I tell you friends, he would not have passed had he not brought into existence the Universal House of Justice. He did it in the form of an embryo and left it to the institution of the hands to take care of this embryonic world order of Baha'u'llah until it is born. And Baha'u'llah helped them in their discussions every year and always, until it reached to the point that the hands decided that the House of Justice be elected, be formed by the end of the 10-year crusade.
So you're saying then that you and the other hands of the cause never at all felt that you didn't have guidance and direction?
No, we had always
all the time.
Guidance. You see, for instance, the beloved Shoghi Effendi had planned that some of the spiritual assemblies, we had two kinds of national spiritual assembly: independent national spiritual assembly and regional national spiritual assembly. The regional had many countries under its guidance. And then the Guardian split later to different countries, made independent countries, so that one of the questions that the hands did not know how to start and how to split, how to make this, it was, and we prayed hard, and finally the Guardian helped us from on high. What happened? There was a notebook, a little notebook, that small one, that the Guardian carried with him and put always here on his heart. It contained the names of the Knights of Baha'u'llah, the plans that he gave to the world, the houses of worship which he planned to be built, all these things. And he said his own pledge, how much was his own pledge, and how much the pledge of one of the Baha'is who offered for the building of house of worship in somewhere. And then when it was brought to the meeting of the hands, and we all stood with great reverence to study that. And then we found that the Guardian said in 1939, such regional assembly should be split to two, so that we had our guidance. And he had already said that he had given his instructions and guidance for at least 100 years. So that all these helped the hands. And furthermore, Baha'u'llah in the book of Abdas, he told us, and the Universal House of Justice has already translated that wonderful passage, that what happens, the time will come that there is no Guardian and no Universal House of Justice. And that's what has happened. So that the institution of the hands had a great responsibility, and it was fulfilled. And they with the help of Baha'u'llah, they could do the assignment that was unique.
When you look back, were those years of great activity? Was it a very busy time for you in the other hands, or was it more you felt that everything was laid out?
No. Well,
was it a hectic period?
The hands were very active, traveling and teaching, and we had continental hands. Each continent had its own hands, and itinerant hands, the Guardian called, so that the Guardian had already trained us, so that before his passing, the hands were dispersed, and they knew what to do and what they did.
When you came to the West and to the United States to live, was that in 1959?
1960. What happened in the Holy Land? They studied the whole situation of the world and the needs of the cause in different parts of the world, and that was the beginning or the middle of the rebellion of that man who violated the covenant. So what happened in the gathering of the conclave of the hands, it was suggested that someone to move to the west. And when they mentioned my name almost unanimously, I gathered that was the promise of the Guardian. He said, I'll send you to the west. So the moment they said it, I said, here you are, I'm ready. That's what has happened.
And when did you first visit Guatemala?
Guatemala? Well, Guatemala during the lifetime of the Guardian too. Yes. I visited Guatemala several times.
Is Guatemala still a very special place for you?
Oh, very much so. When I go there, I remember all these things. The Guardian said, he said, the authorities come to me and they say the cause of God has reached to places which is difficult to pronounce their names. And since he said it, I don't worry about the names at all. You see, I forget the terms and names. What was I forgot, I asked you so many times.
High school.
I don't worry. I forget. And this is what the Guardian said all the time. He said, the cause of God has reached to these places, which is difficult to pronounce.
Have you ever added up how many times you've been around the world? It's got to be several, right?
Yes, I went to different countries several times.
Other than Guatemala, do any of them stand out in your mind? Do you see big differences, for example, between the Orient and the Occident? Some historians.
Well, I think now with the teachings of Baha'u'llah, the whole world is just one country. It's one country. The first time I left Persia to go on pilgrimage, when I reached Iraq, Baghdad, the Iraq territory, I said, what's it? The earth is the same color, the same thing. There's no difference. And that was, I was so excited. My first time going out of Persia. And now everywhere you go you can see one country, this world, and Baha'u'llah is
You were sort of disappointed to see that the Earth looks the same, and
yeah, well, and now they say that these the astronauts, when they come back, they don't know where to go. They say they come back to the Earth, not to
with a new perspective. Yes,
this is the day of Baha'u'llah, the Lord.
Yes. We should probably stop. Yes, says Jim Beasley.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
You're most welcome.